Before my best friend April threw herself into the pages of that trashy billionaire romance novel, she made me a promise. She swore, with the kind of confidence only a woman with a plan can have, that conquering the corporate ladder would be child's play. She bragged that she'd secure a $300 million payout within a year and come back to take me on a world tour. I actually believed her. I thought she'd breeze through the plot, collect her check, and be home for Christmas. I didn't expect the story to go completely off the rails. Instead of being the powerful fiancée to the CEO, she was being systematically dismantled by a manipulative, pick-me secretary who seemed to make it her life's mission to see April destroyed. The girl had nearly lost her job half a dozen times. But the breaking point? The secretary had forced April, who was shivering with a 102-degree fever, out into a torrential downpour to inspect a stalled, skeletal construction site, just to torment her. I was beyond livid. I forced the system to bridge me in. I didn't care about the cost. I was going to drag my friend out of that hell's cape myself. The system gave me two choices. I could inhabit the body of the CEO's inaccessible high school sweetheart, the classic trope, or the company's CFO. I rejected both. I played my highest tier authority card. The second I materialized in that world, the air shifted. A chorus of disciplined voices rang out around me, synchronized and heavy with respect. Good morning, Madame Beaumont. The elevator doors slid open to a sea of tailored suits. The elite of the corporate world froze in their tracks, bowing their heads in unison. Madame Beaumont. Welcome back, Madame Beaumont. I gave a curt nod, my eyes fixed straight ahead as I strode through the lobby. I didn't have time for pleasantries. As I approached the CEO's corner office, a voice, sugary sweet and utterly fake, drifted toward me. Oh, Madame Beaumont, what a wonderful surprise. If I'd known you were coming, I would have arranged a proper reception. It was Linda, my son Xander's executive assistant. She rushed forward, her hands reaching for my designer tote with an eager, practiced smile. I pivoted slightly, letting her hands grasp thin air. Where is April? That was the only thing that mattered. Linda's hands stiffened for a fraction of a second before she pulled them back, her smile never wavering. Miss Dalton? Oh, she's currently on site at the Riverside project, conducting a safety inspection. An inspection? Today. I glanced at the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the sky was a bruised charcoal. Rain hammered against the glass, blurring the skyline of the city into a gray smudge. Even the construction crews would have been called off in this weather. What the hell was she inspecting? Go get her, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. Linda hesitated, her expression turning into a mask of faux concern. Madam, I'm afraid that's not possible. Mr. Beaumont personally assigned this task. He was quite clear. Miss Dalton is to remain on site for 5 hours to oversee the perimeter. She checked her watch. It's only been 2.5 hours. If we bring her back early, Xander, well, he won't be pleased. I will deal with Xander myself. I snapped. I ignored her and looked past her at the senior management team hovering in the hallway. Go to the Riverside site. Bring April Dalton back. Now. The executive scrambled. Right away, madam. We'll send a car immediately. I nodded, satisfied. It seemed that even though I had stepped down from the chairmanship 3 years ago, no one had forgotten whose name was on the building's foundation. Don't bother with a company car. Use mine. I wasn't waiting another minute. I signaled my head of security with a look and turned on my heel. The suit-clad entourage followed me like a wake behind a ship. The Beaumont matriarch heading to a muddy, unfinished construction site in a storm. If I so much as tripped, half the board of directors would lose their jobs. 10 minutes later, the car pulled up to the skeletal remains of the Riverside project. The site was a graveyard of steel and concrete. In the middle of the mud stood a lone figure, April. She was huddled under a concrete pillar, holding her leather handbag over her head as a pathetic shield against the rain. She was soaked to the bone, her frame trembling so violently I could see it from the car. Her lips were a terrifying shade of blue, her eyes glazed over. I threw the door open before the car had even fully stopped. I draped my cashmere coat over her, pulling her against me. April, stay with me. I'm taking her to the hospital. I barked. My security detail moved like a well-oiled machine, one holding a massive umbrella, another handing me a warm towel, a third already on the phone with the nearest ER. I gripped her ice-cold hand, guiding her toward the car, but Linda had followed us. She stood nearby under her own umbrella, letting out a heavy, performative sigh. Madame Beaumont, I really must say, Miss Dalton is being a bit fragile, isn't she? If she can't handle a little rain, how can she expect to carry the Beaumont name as Xander's wife? I stopped. I turned to her, my gaze cold enough to freeze the raindrops midair. Linda, who told you that the price of admission into this family was physical torture? Linda blinked, momentarily stunned. Miss Dalton has always been pampered. I only meant, I was married into this family for 30 years. I cut her off. And in 3 decades, no one ever told me I had to stand in a thunderstorm at a dead construction site to prove my worth. You, however, are an assistant. Since when do you set the rules for the Beaumonts? Who gave you that authority? Linda's face went bone white. Madam, I didn't mean. Just then, a black Maybach roared into the site entrance. A man stepped out, tall, sharp-featured, and radiating a cold, arrogant energy. Xander Beaumont. He didn't look at April first. He looked at Linda to make sure she wasn't wet, then turned his frown toward me. Mother? What are you doing here? What's going on? I looked at him. This was the hero of the book, the cold CEO, who had been putting my best friend through a meat grinder, my supposed son. Before I could speak, Linda threw herself toward him, her eyes instantly welling with tears. Xander, Madame Beaumont is trying to take Miss Dalton away. I tried to explain your orders, but she told me I had no right to speak. Xander patted her hand absently, his irritation shifting toward me. Mother Linda is my personal staff. Please show her some professional courtesy. The inspection was my idea, not hers. I wanted April to build some character, he continued, his voice devoid of empathy. She needs to understand the grit it takes to run a company like this. It's for her own good. I looked down at April in my arms. Her face was flushed with fever, her head lolling against my shoulder. She was barely conscious. Character building? I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Checking a stalled site in a fever, in a storm. Is that grit, Xander? Xander's expression remained stony. Mother, when you and Dad started this company from a garage, you dealt with worse. If she wants to be my wife, she needs to handle it. If a little rain gives her a fever, it just proves she's too soft. He cast a fond look at Linda. Linda grew up in the foster system. She knows what real hardship is. She wouldn't be complaining. Linda looked down modestly. I'm just used to it, Mr. Beaumont. It's no big deal. I felt a sharp, bitter laugh bubble up in my throat. Xander, your father and I worked hard because we were poor and had no choice. But the Beaumonts aren't poor anymore. We don't need to harden our family members by inducing pneumonia. Xander's jaw tightened. Mother, I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. I turned my focus to Linda. Actually, Linda, you're right. You are much more accustomed to hardship, aren't you? Since April is clearly too fragile and is heading to the hospital, you can take over her shift. Linda's eyes went wide. The Riverside site needs an 8-hour daily inspection. 30 days a month. Rain or shine, I said. I'd love to see what real grit looks like on you. Linda's face drained of all color. Xander stepped forward, scowling. Mother, Linda is a woman. She can't be expected to stand on a muddy site all day. It's too much. I scoffed. Oh. So you do realize it's hard for a woman? Is April not a woman, Xander? He opened his mouth, then closed it, finding no retort. Linda bit her lip, her eyes shimmering with tears. Xander, I think Madame Beaumont just doesn't like me. Xander waved a hand dismissively, his tone becoming clipped and frustrated. Fine, whatever. Just take April to the hospital. It'll be bad for PR if she actually gets sick on company grounds. I have a contract to negotiate, he added, turning back to his car. Linda, you're with me. He didn't look back as they climbed into the Maybach and sped away. I immediately got April into my car. As we pulled away, I looked at her sleeping pale face. Hang in there, April, I thought. I'm taking over from here. The ER light stayed on for 20 minutes before the doctor came out. He told me that if we'd been 30 minutes later, she would have been headed straight for the ICU. I stationed 2 of my personal guards at her door and called in Mrs. Gable, my most trusted housekeeper. Mrs. Gable, pay attention, I said. April hates cilantro. She won't touch radishes or green peppers. Her stomach is sensitive, so she needs small, frequent meals. Treat her like she's my own daughter, because she's going to be the next Mrs. Beaumont, whether my son likes it or not. Mrs. Gable nodded solemnly. I walked to the bedside. April was half awake, her eyes unfocused, her cheeks burning with fever. This wasn't the April I knew. My April was a firecracker. She had a laugh that could fill a room and enough ambition to move mountains. Now she was drowning in an oversized hospital gown, her wrists so thin they looked like they might snap. I tucked the blanket around her. In her delirium, she murmured, I'm sorry, I was useless. I clenched my fists. Xander, Linda, if you want to play this game, I'm going to flip the table. 2 weeks later, April was discharged. Her parents came to see me, their faces etched with worry. Madame Beaumont, we appreciate everything you've done, but maybe we should just call off the engagement. We don't want our daughter to suffer anymore. I looked them in the eye. I understand, but I give you my word. As long as I am breathing, April will be the one standing at the head of the Beaumont family. The wedding remained set for May 18th, the day of the ceremony. The hotel was a fortress of white roses and champagne. The elite were out in full force. April sat in the dressing room, a vision in custom lace, holding her bouquet with a quiet, steady hand. I stood by the window and checked my watch. 9:15 a.m. The groom's motorcade should have arrived at the Dalton estate by now. My phone buzzed. It was my head of security. Madam, Mr. Beaumont hasn't left. The motorcade is still parked at the hotel entrance. Where is he? At his private villa in Emerald Bay. I didn't hesitate. I drove straight there. Inside the villa, Linda was sobbing as if her heart were breaking. Xander was holding her, whispering sweet nothings into her ear. Linda, stop crying, please. Linda choked out a sob. Xander, if you marry her today, I'll have nothing. I grew up with no one, and then I found you. If I lose you, I don't want to live. Xander pulled her closer. I won't marry her. You're the only one I love. I walked into the room without knocking. They both bolted upright. Xander's face went stiff. Mother, what are you doing here? The wedding starts at noon, I said calmly. I'm not going. Xander tightened his grip on Linda. The wedding is off. Linda's sobbing slowed, a flash of triumph in her eyes. Xander, I said, staring him down. I'm going to ask you one last time. Are you coming? He leaned back, his tone arrogant. Maybe. If you agree to give Linda a 10% stake in the company, she's the one I truly want to be with. April is just a business arrangement you forced on me. I'll give her the title of Mrs. Beaumont, but the real power stays with Linda. I let out a cold snort. 10%? Beaumont Group is valued at $80 billion. You want me to hand over $8 billion to an assistant? She deserves it, he insisted. April is the one who deserves it. My smile vanished. Linda will never see a dime of Beaumont money. Xander laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. Then we have nothing to talk about. We both know why the Daltons want this marriage. If I don't show up today, April becomes the laughingstock of the city. So does our family. She can't afford that humiliation. Neither can you. He actually thought he was the prize. He thought without him, the world stopped turning. I didn't argue. I turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, I looked back at him. Xander, don't regret this. He reclined on the sofa, pulling Linda into his lap. I won't. 30 minutes later, Xander's phone rang. It was his best friend, Marcus. Xander, man, your mom is a legend. 30% of the voting shares and the official heirship, all tied to the marriage. If you marry April, you're officially the king of Beaumont Group. Congrats, man. Xander's hand froze on the phone. What? Wait, are you playing dumb? The whole city knows. Oh, and I heard your younger brother just landed from London. I see him there now. The voice on the other end faded into static as Xander bolted upright. Get the car. We're going to the hotel. Now. Xander's face lost all color. His younger brother, Ethan Beaumont. The son everyone forgot about because he never fought for attention. While Xander spent years playing emperor in the company, Ethan had quietly built Beaumont Group's entire European division into a money-printing machine. And unlike Xander, Ethan actually understood what responsibility meant. Get the car? Xander shouted again. Linda scrambled after him. Xander, wait for me. The two raced toward the hotel. For the first time all day, panic was written all over Xander's face. Because suddenly he realized something horrifying. His mother hadn't begged. She hadn't threatened. She hadn't negotiated. She had simply left. And Madame Beaumont never walked away from a fight unless she'd already won. Meanwhile, at the wedding venue, the guests were buzzing. The ceremony was supposed to start 15 minutes ago. Whispers spread through the ballroom. Where's the groom? Did something happen? Poor Miss Dalton. This is humiliating. April sat calmly in the bridal suite. Far calmer than anyone expected. The old April might have cried. The old April might have desperately called Xander. The old April might have begged for an explanation. But after months of humiliation, after the construction site, after the hospital, something inside her had changed. She simply looked at me. He's not coming, is he? No. April nodded. Then she surprised me. She smiled. A genuine smile. Good. I blinked. Good. She laughed softly. Madame Beaumont, do you know how exhausting it is pretending to love an idiot? For the first time in weeks, I saw my best friend again. The real April. The one who feared absolutely nothing. The one who could talk herself into or out of any situation. The one who had promised she'd conquer this novel. I stayed because I thought completing the plot was the fastest way home. She rolled her eyes. But your son is dumber than the original book version. Several bridesmaids choked trying not to laugh. I couldn't help laughing too. You're not wrong. A knock came at the door. My head of security entered. Madam, Mr. Ethan Beaumont has arrived. The room went silent. A moment later Ethan stepped inside. Tall, elegant, calm. Nothing like his brother. His eyes landed on April. Then he bowed politely. Miss Dalton. April stared, then whispered to me. Wait. I knew that tone. Oh no. She narrowed her eyes. Why is the second male lead hotter than the male lead? I nearly choked. Downstairs. The guests suddenly erupted. The ballroom doors opened. Everyone expected Xander. Instead Ethan walked in beside April. A collective gasp spread through the crowd. What is happening? That's Ethan Beaumont. The younger son? Why is he escorting the bride? At the front of the ballroom I stepped onto the stage. The microphone amplified my voice. Thank you all for coming. Instant silence. Unfortunately, my eldest son has chosen not to attend his own wedding. Gasps echoed everywhere. Several reporters nearly fainted from excitement. I continued. Because of his actions, he's been removed as heir to Beaumont Group effective immediately. The room exploded. People practically leaped out of their seats. Removed? The heir? Today? At his own wedding? Before the noise could settle, I delivered the second bomb. As of this morning, all voting shares previously allocated to Xander Beaumont have been reassigned. I looked toward Ethan. To Ethan Beaumont. The ballroom erupted again. Some executives looked seconds away from passing out. Years of succession planning had just changed in front of their eyes. Ethan remained perfectly composed. Meanwhile, April looked delighted, like someone watching a reality show. At that exact moment, the ballroom doors burst open. Xander stormed inside. Linda followed behind him. Both were breathless. Both looked disheveled. And both arrived just in time to hear the announcement. No, Xander shouted. Mother, you can't do this. Hundreds of heads turned. The humiliation was immediate. I looked at him calmly. I already did. You tricked me. You abandoned your fiancée on her wedding day. You chose your assistant over your responsibilities. You attempted to extort your own family. I tilted my head. What exactly was I supposed to reward? The guests murmured. Xander opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because there was no defense. Everyone knew it. Even him. Linda suddenly stepped forward. Madame Beaumont, this is unfair. Xander loves me. I looked at her. For a long moment. Then smiled. Wonderful. Linda's expression brightened. Then, I continued. Since you love each other so much, neither of you will have any need for Beaumont money. Her smile froze. I snapped my fingers. My lawyer stepped forward. Miss Linda Parker. He handed her a document. You are terminated effective immediately. Another document. Your company housing has been revoked. Another. Your bonuses have been cancelled pending investigation into unauthorized use of corporate resources. By the third page, she looked ready to collapse. Xander finally realized what was happening. Without Beaumont Group, without the company apartment, without the luxury lifestyle, without the private cars, without the expense accounts, Linda had absolutely nothing. And for the first time since I'd met her, the look she gave Xander wasn't loving. It was resentful. 3 days later, the internet exploded. Articles about the runaway groom dominated every headline. Xander became a laughingstock. Linda became a meme. Investors publicly praised Madame Beaumont's decision. Beaumont Group stock actually rose. Apparently shareholders preferred competent heirs. Who would have guessed? 1 month later, Ethan officially took over as CEO. The board approved unanimously. Meanwhile, Xander tried starting his own company. It failed within 6 weeks. Turns out giving orders and actually running a business are very different skills. Linda left him shortly afterward. The moment the money disappeared, so did her devotion. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. Nobody could have predicted it. As for April, well, the novel system completely malfunctioned. The original plot had been annihilated. The heroine wasn't supposed to reject the CEO. The villainous secretary wasn't supposed to be exposed. The heir wasn't supposed to be replaced. Nothing made sense anymore. The system finally gave up trying to correct events. A few months later, April received her reward notification. Mission complete. Plot successfully conquered. Bonus reward granted, $300 million. I nearly screamed when she called me. You did it. I did it. $300 million? $300 million. When are you coming home? A pause. Then laughter. Actually, I narrowed my eyes. April. Don't be mad. April. Ethan asked me out. I stared at the phone, then burst out laughing. Of course. Of course this ridiculous novel would end like that. The second male lead won. The toxic CEO lost everything. The pick-me's secretary vanished. The heroine got richer than everyone. And my best friend somehow broke an entire fictional universe by refusing to tolerate nonsense. Honestly, that sounded exactly like April. 6 months later she returned home with her $300 million payout, a massive diamond ring, and a fiancé who adored her. The first thing she did was throw a plane ticket onto my lap. I looked down. First class. Around the world itinerary. Every continent. Every luxury destination imaginable. April grinned. Told you I'd take you traveling. And for once, she had actually kept her promise. 5 years later, people still talked about the wedding disaster of May 18th. Business schools used it as a case study. Tabloids recycled it every anniversary. Socialites treated it like modern mythology. The heir who threw away an empire for a secretary. The secretary who threw away her future for greed. The bride who walked away with $300 million. And the matriarch who dismantled her own son's inheritance before lunch. No one ever got tired of the story. Especially because everyone knew how it ended. Ethan and April's wedding was held on a private island. No drama. No runaway groom. No secret mistress. No tears. Just happiness. I sat in the front row while April walked down the aisle. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't forcing a smile. She looked radiant. Victorious. Free. When Ethan saw her, his eyes softened immediately. The look on his face said everything. He didn't see a business arrangement. He didn't see a stepping stone. He didn't see someone he could mold or test. He saw the woman he loved. And that made all the difference. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause lasted nearly a full minute. I cried. April cried. Even Ethan got suspiciously emotional. The photographs from that day became some of the happiest memories of our lives. As for Xander, the world kept turning without him. For years he tried to prove everyone wrong. Every business failed. Every investment collapsed. Every attempt to rebuild his reputation ended in embarrassment. The people who once surrounded him disappeared one by one. Without power and money, he discovered something painful. Very few people had actually loved him. One rainy afternoon, he showed up at Beaumont headquarters. He stood in the lobby staring at the building his grandparents had built. The company that should have been his. The empire he had thrown away. No one stopped him. No one welcomed him either. He was just another visitor. A ghost haunting his own mistakes. When he asked to see Ethan, the receptionist politely informed him that the CEO was busy. When he asked to see me, she informed him that Madame Beaumont was in Monaco. He left shortly afterward. Alone. For the first time in his life, he finally understood. His downfall had never been Linda. It had never been me. It had never been April. It had been his own arrogance. Unfortunately, that realization came years too late. And Linda? The last I heard, she was working as an assistant again. Not to a billionaire. Not to a CEO. Just an ordinary manager at an ordinary company. Which would have been perfectly respectable if she hadn't spent years believing she was destined to become queen of an empire. Sometimes the greatest punishment isn't losing everything. It's remembering what you could have had. One evening, years later, April and I sat on the balcony of her seaside villa. The sun was setting over the water. Her children were running through the garden. Ethan was attempting to assemble a toy castle while being thoroughly defeated by a 6-year-old. It was a beautiful sight. April handed me a glass of wine. Do you ever think about how crazy all this was? I laughed. You mean the part where you got trapped in a terrible billionaire romance novel? Exactly. The part where my son lost $80 billion because he was an idiot? She nearly choked laughing. That part too. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then she smiled softly. You know, when I first entered that world, I thought the reward was the money. It wasn't. She shook her head. The reward was realizing I never had to beg people to value me. The waves rolled gently against the shore. Below us, Ethan's dramatic defeat by the toy castle drew cheers from the children. April watched them with a peaceful expression. The moment I stopped chasing someone who didn't love me, she said quietly, everything got better. I looked at my best friend, the woman who had survived a collapsing plot, destroyed an entire novel storyline, and somehow come out stronger than ever. Then I raised my glass. To breaking the script. April grinned and clinked her glass against mine. To breaking the script. Above us, the sky blazed gold and crimson. The story that had tried so hard to trap her inside its pages had long since ended. The heroine had chosen herself. The villain lost. The empire survived. The right man got the girl. And my best friend got her happy ending.